All right, so that's not the right document. Where did it go? All right,
Well,
so
I see this the shared screen.
yep. So I would like
Looks
to introduce
nice.
for our speaker tonight,
Thank you.
Mr. Timothy Esposito. Tim is an STC Fellow with over 20 years of technical communication experience. He is the STC Secretary and past president of the STC Philadelphia Metro Chapter. He lives just outside of Philadelphia with his wife and son. He has been instrumental to us in helping us to revamp our chapter website. So without further ado, everyone, please welcome Tim Esposito.
Hey.
Hey, let me.
Thank you. So you can see my screen then.
Yep,
Got
you're
the
good.
Grand
Yes.
Canyon there. Okay.
Yeah.
I will switch it over to PowerPoint, which will then share the wrong screen as it does every time. There we go. Okay. So as Rachel said, I've been working with several members from your area to help revamp and combine the multiple community websites into one website. And as working through some of those ideas and concepts, I said, well, I have a class on this that I teach. So I have a one-day workshop that I taught at the Rochester chapter that is going to be turned into a online course that STC will be offering this spring. And I've been doing this webinar for about two and a half years now. It was designed to help STC communities run their websites. And I gave this presentation for the first time in 2018, and I had so much information, I ended up splitting it into two presentations. So I named it 101 and 201. And since this is the first time I'm presenting for your community, you start with the 101. Otherwise, you get way too many questions. So here's a bio. Rachel did a great job introducing me. But I've done way too many things for STC is what it boils down to. I'm currently on the board of directors as the secretary. And don't squint reading all that stuff. I have all the free time just to do STC stuff, it seems. Okay, so how did I learn about creating websites? It all started when I was in college many, many years ago, where the internet was new and everyone was downloading Netscape Navigator because Internet
Hmm.
Explorer 2 was no good. And I went to a website and I had a job in the computer lab doing tech support. And it turns out there's not a lot of kids in the computer lab the first week of summer classes. So I basically taught myself how to do HTML by opening Notepad and typing in all of the HTML. And I created a website, which was basically a link of other websites. So that way this was, just using the computer lab one. So that way I could find all the sites I wanted to go to. And somehow this created such an excitement that one of the professors recommended me for a paid internship at a local hospital in Philadelphia where they needed a webmaster. And I got the job. And this is a screenshot. I went on the Internet Archive the other day and pulled up a screenshot from the 1996 McGee Rehabilitation Hospital website. And this is what it looked like. And no wonder they hired me because I had a bunch of bullet points that were links and their website was a bunch of bullet points with links, which is what most of the internet was in 1996. Either that or little animated GIF farms. So that started me down the path of doing website stuff. In 2012, I took over the Philadelphia Metro Chapter website uh, and revamped that, came up with a new theme, rearranged the content, sorted everything out, tied it together, and basically created the way that it is now. And then in 2015, the board asked me to create a website for the Community Affairs Committee for STC to illustrate how chapter and SIG websites could be created and maintained. And I created that as a sample website there. And I've been offering web support since then. So when I got elected to the board this year, Liz, the CEO, said, hey, Tim, we want you to review the stc.org website. You're creating a task force and doing that. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to fix up the stc.org website, which is a big process. And that's how I was referred to this group because they said, we want some guidance with our website as well. So I've met with them several times over the past few months to give them ideas and recommendations on how they can restructure the combined website. So yeah, the Rehab Hospital fixed their website. It looks a little bit better than it did in 1996. Anyway, so for those of you that are attending this, here's the intended audience. People that are setting up a website for the first time or people who want to learn more about WordPress and cPanel basics. And I'll get into what all these terms mean as the presentation goes. So this is really intended for beginners who want to use a potentially sophisticated website creation utility called WordPress. It is not a template kind of thing like Wix.com where you say, oh, I want it to be pink, and it just makes everything pink. It's much more powerful than that. So we're going to talk about 4 major areas this evening. The first one is establishing a domain. Then we'll move into hosting the content of that domain. Then we'll create your content using WordPress and customizing that. And then some basics for the behind the scenes stuff, email forwarders, file management, database management, that kind of thing. So the first thing on that list is web domain registration. This is where you decide what the URL of your site is. And here's my example is the CAC website is cac-stc.org. I did not pick that, but that's what the STC webmaster gave me. So this is the registration for the domain is you're picking the URL. It's not picking where the files live. It's just picking that you own that URL. You have to pay for this and renew it probably every year, or different groups have different plans. Maybe it's quarterly or monthly you pay for it or something like that. If you fail to pay for the URL, then they will give it to someone else, and then your website will need a different URL, and that will confuse people. So this is something you want to automate and keep on top of when you're creating your own website. Now, some sites like GoDaddy here, they offer domain registration and hosting. So that means you can pick the URL and you can pick the place where the files live on the web to be the same place and have it all in one bill. And that may be great, but you really should shop around. There are hundreds of different places that offer registration and hundreds of places that offer hosting. And they might have a really good deal on one and then jack up the prices on the other one. So it doesn't hurt to have them in different places. So shop around to find one that meets your needs. Now, getting a little bit ahead of myself, what ties the two together between the URL naming and where the files live is there's an area in there called name servers. And the name servers are what you put in there. And this is what you're saying is this is where the files will live. So after you've picked a host to hold your files, they give you this information. But on the domain registration site, you have to go in and say, here's where those files live. And it looks like this one. This is the one that the STC group uses for their hosting. So it's just basically another URL or a string of URLs that you put in here. So that's it for the web domain registration. You create the URL and then you tell that URL where it's going to point to find those files that make up your website. Now, web hosting, as I suggested earlier, this is where the files actually live. This is not a commercial for this group. I just thought it was a cute picture. And this is one that I've worked with in the past. And they have some nice deals. But again, they have not paid me to say that. This is just where you're choosing where your files will physically be stored on the web. Who's holding the files? And as I said, it could be the same place where you register your URL, but it doesn't have to be. So just shop around. So we've talked about the URLs and the file location. So next we're going to talk about WordPress. WordPress is a free open source website development software kit that you can install on hosted sites. Now there are 2 flavors to WordPress, not hosted and hosted. We're not really going to talk about not hosted very much because it's very underpowered. Not hosted is free. And you just need a WordPress.com account and you can create your own website, which is what I did because I'm all about free. But if you want a really professional and powerful website, then you want to go with a hosted version, in which case you need to have your URL registered, your domain host set up, and then on that, you will install the WordPress software. And as I'll get into that, there's often a way that you can just click a button and say, install WordPress in here, or even the host will give that to you when you set up your registration with them. So the way that WordPress differentiates these two is one is WordPress.com and one is WordPress.org, which that makes sense, but it's really easy to get them confused. The .com is like the free blog, like that I have here for mine, and that's actually the URL to mine, which is vastly underused. And then the other one is .org, and that one has where you can download the software to install it and support and things like that. So we will be in this presentation talking, although in this section right here, exclusively about the hosted type on WordPress.org. Now, one thing, and this is about as techy as I get on this particular presentation, is PHP. Now, back in the day, like I said, back in the 90s, if you wanted a website, you opened up Notepad and you typed up a bunch of HTML files by hand, and that was the website. WordPress does not work that way. So if you look at the file system on the server, it's not a bunch of HTML files. They use a system called PHP, and PHP stands for PHP, Hypertext Processor, in which that PHP stands for Personal Homepage. So it's really a personal homepage hypertext processor. I don't know why they had to have that meta linking in there between the two. And here's you can come back and read this in the handouts that I'll send later on if you've ever read anything by Douglas Hofstadter with his weird acronyms and meta level thoughts. So the idea here with the PHP is that instead of having HTML files which lay out the website, the PHP files generate the website from a database as you view it. This means that you can't just click in it and say, oh, I can see the HTML and where this is. These are calls to a MySQL database that lives on your web server, and that generates the website from the database information. I'm not sure why they do it that way, but that's how it is structured. So if you figure that you're going to go in here with all your HTML knowledge, you won't really necessarily need that because you're not going to be editing the files on the server. And you probably won't be editing PHP files. These are all things that happen somewhat behind the scenes. Now you can if you want to, but I really wouldn't recommend it. Installing WordPress, as I said, either the host will install it for you, or if you have access to the management software that a lot of hosts give you. This one is called cPanel. It's very popular. See here on the left, there's under scripts, there's WordPress. If you click on that, it says, oh, you want to install WordPress? 2 minutes later, WordPress is installed on your site and you're ready to sign in. It's that easy. It just gives you a blank page. So if you've just created a new URL and a new host, and they say, okay, here's your cPanel access, you can come in here, click right on that, and boom, they install empty WordPress for you, and you can begin creating your site from scratch. So they make it very easy to do that. And if this is not there, you can go to WordPress.org, download the install files, copy it over to your server, install it there, boom. Also very easy to do. So with all that information, you can create the website of your dreams, which is what they all look like in 1996, which is probably when the Simpsons episode aired. Does anyone have any questions on all that craziness that I just gave you? I don't have the chat window open right now. I don't know if anything, it disappeared.
If anything comes up in the chat window, I'll read it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Like,
Okay, so you've created your URL, you found a place to host it, you've installed WordPress. The next step is logging into WordPress. WordPress makes this pretty easy. There is a standard URL that gets appended to your basic URL for any WordPress hosted site that will bring you to a sign-on page that looks pretty much like this. So here we've got example.com, and then there's a /wp-login.php. See, there's that PHP. It's not HTML. If you go to any WordPress website and you put that little WP login PHP at the end of the base URL, it's going to bring you to a sign-in page like this. So you have a username and a password, and you can log in, which will be generated, when you create WordPress. This will set you up with that automatically. But just so you know, going forward, there will not necessarily be on your website a big button saying sign in to edit the website here. You can just use this URL and it'll take you to this page, which is good because then you don't have a link that a troll can scroll through and click on the links and try and connect to your website with. Once you sign in, you're given a dashboard, which looks something like this. The dashboard has a big area in the center that I very rarely look at. And on the left, there's a menu. And this menu controls all of the function and features of your website. The options that appear here are customizable. What I have here are pretty much the baseline ones with a few extra add-ons. I'm going to today go through all of the baseline ones, step by step, going down the line here, and explain what they all mean. But this is the landing zone where you'll come back in when you're editing the website to make any of your changes. It's your toolbox. So the first thing I want to talk about are posts. Now, there are two types of content that WordPress defaults to. One is posts, and the other one are pages. Posts are showing the original function of WordPress, which was to make a blog. So a post is something that is timely. It is, hey, here's what I'm doing this week. Or if you have a blog, here is my latest update from my adventures in life. Or if it's your chapter, hey, here's our upcoming meeting. Or my chapter president got an award, something like that. So as you can see here in these examples, these are all, hey, join us for meetings. So these are things that you can configure to appear on the main page of your website. And as new ones appear, the old ones get pushed further and further down the page, just like you do in a regular blog. Now you can further group these under categories. And categories let you sort and control what appears in a feed. And I'll get more into feeds later, but you can create whole pages on your website, which is nothing but a feed of particular posts as per their categories. So here we have a category of announcements, leadership resources, and webinar. So you could create a feed, and as I said, I'll get into this later, or as a menu option on your site for announcements, and people could click on announcements, and it'll take all of the posts that have a category of announcements and list them all there. And if you have other ones that are not announcements, but they're, I don't know, updates or something like that, they won't appear there. Only the ones that have a category of announcements are there. You can further classify posts using tags. When you use a tag on something, this is a much more granular approach. So if you use a category of events, and you can tag what type of event it is: networking, educational, workshop, something like that. So then if someone's reading a post and they see that there's tags there for workshop, they can click on that tag of workshop, and it'll show all the other posts that are tagged with workshop also, for example. So I know this is a lot, but the posts are, timely things. The categories are ways to group those posts, and you can create whole pages dedicated just to a single type of category. And tags are ways to further categorize the categories and those posts. Now, when you have a post, it opens, and this is they've of course since changed the editor since I made the screenshot, and I'm making copious use of past STC President Ben Welk and Sarah here, because they were all over the CAC website when I was doing these screenshots. Plus, it's really fun to have Ben appear in all these goofy pictures just to tease him. He always cries about this when I show it off to people. But so there is a WYSIWYG editor. You don't need to code everything in HTML. This is what it basically looks like. They've since moved to a block format, which a lot of people don't like. So there's actually an option to go back to the traditional one. So I'll just pretend that I did that. When you have the WYSIWYG editor, it's a lot like Word. There's similar function buttons up at the top for indentation and flush right and bullets and that kind of thing. On the right-hand side, you can see the list of categories, so you can check off which categories are being used, and if there are tags, those appear below. You can tag things there with that. You will also see that this one is in the upper right. It is published. It is visible to the public, and how many times it's been revised, so you can track the history there. So it's very easy to go through and create content this way. So that's posts, and I'll get more into the editors later because the editors are shared across posts and pages. So the next area are pages. So pages create the skeleton of your website. These are things that are not timely. These are static structures of your site, pages that are always there, usually menu options that don't really change very much, content that does not necessarily need to be updated all the time. Because if something is constantly changing, you would use a post for that because it's a lot easier to push out updates in a post. But in a page, it's more of your underlying structure. So here's an example from the CAC website. as it appeared a few years ago. We've got an about page, contact us page, some leadership resources, stuff like that, things that don't change too much. So when you create a page, it looks very much like the editor for the post. It's the same sort of thing. It's the same WYSIWYG. There's slightly different attributes on the right. So there's no categories and there's no tags, but you can create a hierarchy. So here you have a parent of leadership resources. And if we go back a slide, you can see how these have a little hyphen in front of them, the bottom 4? They are sub pages to the leadership resources page. This hierarchy is really key for organizing your website, because if you have everything at the top level, it might be very difficult to manage that as your site grows. So if you have a way to group your pages under one another, it's easier to maintain, and it's easier to make a structure that not only you can use, but the people using your site, the end users, will understand. I'm working on the stc.org website, and they didn't structure that way. So I go into one page and it's 6 levels down because someone just kept nesting things under there, nesting and nesting, nesting. And then there's some other things that should be at that same level and they're at the top level. And because it's done that way, it's alphabetized in here, and then they're out of order and the related areas aren't together. So it's a maintenance nightmare for somebody who's trying to maintain the site. So take my advice and put some thought into the structure of your site. The structure also controls the full URL. So if it's Community Achievement Award, the URL for that's going to be cac.stc.org/leadership resources/Community Achievement Award. So it controls the actual URL on the site, which you can see at the top. There's a permalink that tells you what the URL will be on the site when the end users look at it.
But you can edit.
Yes, you can edit not the full structure of it. The first part of this changes based on how you have it in the hierarchy, but you can change the last part, which if you squint, it's slightly bolder in the screenshot than the rest of the text. So you can change the community-achievement-award part by clicking the edit, but you would not be able to change the full URL at the beginning.
But you could change the higher parts at their levels.
Yep. So as you go, so this one was resources instead of leadership resources. So if I were to have edited that one, I would say, okay, make this called resources. That affects all the other things downstream in the hierarchy. So behind the WYSIWYG, there is a text option. And in this screen version, there's a little tab here that says text. In the most recent UI, they moved it to be somewhere else. I think it's up over in the upper right-hand corner near this publish thing. But what this is, this lets you peek behind the scenes of the WYSIWYG to see what kind of HTML is going on. It's not full true HTML, but it will show you the basic tag structure that's being used. So if you're familiar with HTML or XML, you can see how that structure comes in. And if you need to embed some sort of HTML in there, this is where you would paste it in. Sometimes you might have, you want to reference, and I get into this later, you can embed a calendar. And that calendar would have code that Google gives you saying, here's the HTML. You just paste that HTML in here. And then in the WYSIWYG, it looks like a calendar. I find this useful for that reason. And also, if the WYSIWYG is really weird and you're like, why does it keep bolding this thing? And why does it look like an H3 that's italicized, even though I cleared the text? You can come in here and say, oh, it's got these weird nestings of tags, and you can just manually delete that stuff out and clean it up.
You could do that with PayPal buttons too.
Yes. Actually, I got an award for our chapter, one of this, what was it, the one with the race car flags, for doing a PayPal donation button like 15 years ago for our chapter when it was new, because they're like, what, you can embed a PayPal button? And I had figured out how to do that by pasting in this code. A pace setter award, that's what it was. Anyway, so that is the basic editor that is shared between posts and pages. And pages are the skeleton, the posts are the temporary stuff that kind of flies by and changes. So next up, we have media. Well, are there any questions or comments on posts and pages before I move into the media section?
Yeah, are posts and pages available in the free version, the mini version of WordPress, or
Yes.
not?
Yes, it does function that way. And you can create temporary posts, and there are standard pages as well. So yes, it is the same structure there.
So if
The
you're
free
trying to,
the
if
free
you're trying to,
version doesn't have the customization of adding extra programs in to make the website flashier and fancier.
yeah, so if you're just trying to learn WordPress, that'll be a good place to go to first.
Yep.
And yeah, okay.
And I can show you, I mean, you can feel free to look at my site, not that you remember the URL, but I'll show that to you guys at the end.
Okay.
Are there any other questions on posts and pages?
I'm not seeing any of the chat in the moment. I'll let you know if any come up.
Okay. Well, we'll move into media. So media is pictures, attachments, PDFs, Word documents, PowerPoints, whatever files live on your website that you want people to be able to download. Mostly, I would say it's pictures, but it depends on what you're doing with your site. If you want everyone to have to download PDFs, you can do that. It's probably not great for search materials to do it that way, but if that's what you want to do, you can. So here's an example of a media library, and you can see we've got a lot of images here. We also have a number of PDFs, and at this time, the STC website was being redone, and a lot of the applications for the awards were not able to be hosted on stc.org. So I set them up on the CAC website that year so people could download them, and they lived on out here in the web server, which is okay, but you don't want to fill up your web server with junk. And I'll get into that later. So there's a media manager, and you can sort by whether you want pictures or files or anything like that. When you work on a particular picture, and I'm going to pick on Ben once again, because why not? There are several attributes to each item that's in the media. So there's a title for it. There's a default caption. There's alt text. So that way, if someone is using your site and they're using a screen reader and they're vision impaired and they cannot see the picture, this is this description of the picture that they will get. And then there's also a description of the picture for your purposes. What is this picture to be used for? So that way, if you're collaborating with other people on the site, they know, oh, when I find this picture, this is what this picture is about. Of course, I made up these silly things here for this one. And then uploaded to at the bottom, you'll see that that's one of the pages, or that's probably a post that actually uses this picture. It gives you a URL at the top, which is the URL for that picture, so you can make references to that if you want, and you can change the title as you wish. This one just came in as Ben New, because I guess they have an older picture of Ben. So when you've added the media, you can put all that information in, and you'll see it there on the right-hand side. It pulls it all in, and then you can even change the default items here for attachment. Do you want it to be aligned? What do you want it to link to? What's the default size? Now, one thing I want to say here is, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pictures, 7 pictures of Sarah, 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 pictures of Ben in there, 5 pictures of Ben. It's really easy to say, oh, I'm making a new post, and you just grab a new picture and upload it, and then you end up with 6 pictures of the same person in there. This is why it pays to take the time when you upload media to give it a good title, give it a good description, so you're not filling up your server with multiple pictures of the same person. I cleaned this up after after this was done. I didn't realize someone else was doing this. So it looks much better now if you were to hack into the CAC website. So when you are creating, and this isn't a post, you can insert a picture. There's that add media button on the upper left. If you do that and you select Ben, here he is. It comes in, and it even comes in with the caption, the man, the myth, the legend. You don't have to keep any of that stuff. That's just the default. You can change it to be the man, the mouse, the legend. You can change it to whatever you want, but it comes in with the default from the media manager. So that way, if you always have the same picture of someone, because he's your president or CEO, it always has the same little description there consistently, and you don't have to type it in every time. But like I said, you can always override that on a case-by-case basis and change the size of it, the alignment, the text, the description, the alt text. All that stuff can be changed on a case-by-case basis. But the benefit of taking the time to put it into the media manager is you don't have to worry about setting that up every time that picture is reused throughout your website. And here's an example of when you edit the details, you can change the alt text, the caption. You can change here, the link to is what I've got selected here. Do you want it to go right to the media file? So if they were to click on the picture, does it just bring them to download that picture? Does it go to a different URL? Do you want it to go to another attachment page, stuff like that. So you can control what happens when people click on the picture, or nothing happens when they click on the picture. So that's the basics of media. You don't get all of the same options when you're dealing with PowerPoint and stuff like that, because you don't have an alt text and things like that. But you can still set up descriptions for them, so that way you know what that weird PDF is that has an odd name or something like that.
I have a quick question about media.
Yes.
Is it saved wherever you're hosting your website?
Yes.
Okay.
So you have to be careful, because if you put lots of big pictures on there, you will consume the allotted space that your host has given you, which will possibly push you over the limit for charging more money.
Right.
If you also put a really big file on there and suddenly it's really awesome and everyone's going to your site and downloading it, it's going to consume the bandwidth that they dedicated to your website, and they will charge you more money. So my recommendation is, do not put videos on your site. Put them on YouTube and link to YouTube on your site. Pictures, thumbnails, and stuff like that are probably fine if they're not terribly big, but don't put, some triple high definition 20 gigabyte picture on your website for people to download. That's not the right venue for that, unless you're into selling 20 gigabyte pictures.
Right.
So,
Okay. Thanks.
any other questions?
None in chat.
Okay, so we'll move into appearance. Appearance is the next menu option, and there are several items in here, ranging from themes, customizing those themes, something called widgets, setting up your menus, and creating a header. And I'll go through each of those in turn. So the first thing up is themes, and themes controls the look and feel of your website. There are free themes and there are paid for themes. There are themes that come with WordPress, and there are ones that you can download from their website and other people's websites to install. The themes control the layout, or the options for the layout. They control the color scheme. They control the font. So when you download and install a particular theme, your whole site can get rearranged and structured the way that that theme looks. And themes have different themes, I shall say. That's a really bad way to say it. But some are designed for blog posts. Some are designed for like a newspaper format. Some of them are magazine format. Some of them to highlight pictures. Some of them are to highlight text. So what is your site about? You can go in and say, oh, I want I want one that has 3 columns. Okay, you check off the list. Only show me the ones that have 3 columns. Okay, these are the ones with 3 columns. No, I only need 2 columns. Get rid of 3 columns, check 2 columns. Okay, these are the ones give me 2 columns option, that kind of thing. So if you want a picture heavy site or a blog heavy site, choose a theme accordingly. WordPress develops themes that are named after the year. Here's the 2017 theme. And their themes are clean and simple and easy to use. And each of their year-named themes is slightly different. So it's not just like an update to the same theme. It's a new variation to show the new possibilities offered by WordPress that year. You can download and install any number of these. They will take up your web server space. And if you're not using them, delete them so they're not cluttering up your site. Like anything else that you install, it can be updated by the person that developed it. So you want to have a theme that is supported by whoever created it. Don't install that theme from 2012 because, 11, 20,000 years later, it's probably not going to look that great or work that great because technology advanced and it did not. So when choosing a theme, pick one that is maintained and trustworthy and does what you want it to do. Inside of the theme, you can control some basic settings of your site. One of the main ones that I like to point out is, how does your home page work? So the main page that everyone goes to when they go to your site is the home page. And because WordPress was originally designed as a blog site, the default was to show your latest posts. Remember your posts and pages? It shows the latest posts, the temporary things that are timely. So that way, when you create a new post, the homepage changes to display the newest post at the top, and the next one, oldest, gets pushed down a little bit. The alternative to that is to create a static page, and that static page is not updated by the post feeds. It is welcome to my site, and this is information that I will update manually whenever I need to, but probably not that often. And that's great for some websites. It depends on the focus of your site. If you're doing a blog, you should probably do the latest posts. The latest posts can be, you can actually, I didn't get into this earlier, but on a post, you can make it sticky, and a sticky post will always be at the top. So you can have your latest post, make a welcome one, be the sticky one that's always at the top, and then have the next newest one, or whatever the newest one is, appear right below that. That's how I have the Philadelphia chapter set up. You can select a logo, a site title, the tagline, what appears up, in that little tab at the top of the browser. Here it is. There's the STC logo. There's a little custom icon for it. All that cool stuff that makes your site look slick and together. You can customize all that. Next up is something that sounds really cool called widgets. And widgets are a standard thing in WordPress. And depending on which theme you are using, you may get more widgets. And there are basic widgets, many of which are listed here on the left. And what they do is you are given workspaces in your website. So earlier I said, oh, you could have 2 columns or 3 columns. One of those columns is going to be for text. It's going to be where your posts appear or just your body text. The other columns, that's going to be like, oh, a little calendar that appears on the side, or contact us, or here's the list of my last few tweets that I made, or something like that. So in this example, there's a blog sidebar, there's a footer 1, and there's a footer 2. I have created a copyright, and that's going in a text widget in the footer. So that way at the bottom of the page, it always says copyright this year, or whatever years it is. But you can also see there's a search, a custom HTML, recent posts, archives, categories, and meta. Those are things that appear in a sidebar, which if you look on the right-hand side of this page, look, there's Ben, he's sneaking over there, hi. Anyway, on the right-hand side, there is this little bar. We've got a search bar. You've got to connect with us with some, old icons from when that was set up. And here's some recent posts. And if we travel back in time 1 slide, look, there's a search bar, custom HTML for those connect with us buttons, recent posts, archives. So what I've done here is taken those separate items, drug them in the little thing here into this order, and then it renders automatically on the page and fills in that content as you need it to. The recent posts is automatic. It just says, oh, what are the last 5, or you can configure it. Let's say 5 posts that you made, and it summarizes them there with their titles. So you can easily see that. Widgets are really cool because you can put in HTML. You want something that's not a widget, but you want to call another page or put in a button, or that PayPal button that we discussed earlier. You can do custom HTML, put in that text, and then boom, you'll have a PayPal button right there. Very powerful and very adaptable because everything is drag and drop in here. Oh, I want the search at the bottom. You just click on this and drag it to the bottom. Boom, the search is at the bottom. It's pretty slick, and it's a great way to customize your site. Next up, we have menus. And menus are what goes across the top. Home, about the thing, contact us, resources, a calendar, link to another website, linked about the committee, that kind of thing. So it works with a similar model as the widgets. It's all drag and drop. You can create links to pages, not posts, but pages, or you can create links to feeds. And as I mentioned earlier, feeds are when you take a category of posts and say all of the posts in that category get displayed in chronological order on this page, or maybe reverse chronological. So it's the newest is at the top. So in this one here, we have about the CAC, and this just goes to a page for about the CAC. But if you look down here, we've got a best practices one at the bottom, and that's a category. So that's pulling in those category of posts. So any post that is categorized as a best practice will appear automatically on that page when you go there. You don't need to change it. You don't need to edit it. As long as it's a post in that category, it'll automatically be added there. Does that make sense? It's a menu. Everyone's using them on a website. This is, This is indented, so that is a sub menu under leadership resources. You know, pretty basic UI kind of stuff.
I think
And,
Joe had a question about the themes.
oh, okay.
I'll read off what he had in chat. I have had a lot of trouble finding minimalist themes. Even the ones that are supposedly designed for text have prominent photographs.
Hmm. The trouble with themes is you get what you pay for. So if you're just shopping on the free marketplace, you'll probably find something. It won't fit perfectly. It'll get the job done. It won't be great. Or you could drop any amount of money that you want for any number of companies that are out there just making professional themes. When you do that, you'll probably get a theme that does exactly what you want. But you'll still have to go out and shop for the different groups to see what they offer. I agree. I have a hard time finding themes also. I run a website for a nonprofit group, and there's a sweet little old lady who runs it, and she knows nothing about computers. And she says, my website went away. I don't know where it went. Well, I spent several hours going into the Internet Archive and scraping all of the old web pages off of that and recreating for her in her new WordPress instance. She's like, oh, great, thanks. Not realizing it took me, 3 nights to put that all together for her. And I'm like, well, what do you want us to look? She's like, well, I don't care. I just want the information there. I'm like, okay, let me grab, I have no budget for this, so it's got to be free. So you get what you pay for. The site looks okay. Does it look as good as it could? No. But do I have a budget to make it look better or time? No. So shop around and you have to do your homework, I'm afraid, unless you want to adventure into the realm of creating your own theme, which sounds really cool, but also really time consuming. It's something it's like, oh, I'd love to learn how to do that. I don't have time to do that. So I'm using someone else's themes. Philadelphia Metro Chapter, we bought a whole package of themes. So we spent $300 10 years ago, and we have access. We can swap out between, I don't know, 200 different themes or something like that. And they're constantly developed and updated, so they look professional. Any other questions?
I think we're good in chat.
Okay. So feeds I already got into. I got ahead of myself on that page. But to reiterate, these feeds are when you take categories of posts and you create a whole page based on that category of posts. Sticky posts, as I said earlier, there's a checkbox on a post. If you want to make it sticky, then it always appears at the top of whatever feed it appears in. Plugins. Now, plugins, here's where we draw a line between what's available in the free version of WordPress and the hosted version. You don't really get plugins in the free version. So plugins are little programs that you can download to customize your website. Some of them are free, some of them are not free. Some of them are free, but they want you to pay more to get more functionality. And again, you get what you pay for. If you're running a professional site, it's worth it to pay for some of the plugins. The SEO one, Yoast SEO is a really cool one that if you're running a professional site, I do recommend that you use that one, for example. And I get into SEO in the 201 presentation. But what the takeaway here is, if you want to download a little tool to make your website cooler or add extra functionality, plugins are where you shop. In this screenshot here, we've got a cache. The ones that are shaded in the light blue, those are active. The ones that are not shaded and have the word activate in them are not turned on. You don't want to have 2,000 plugins on your system because they will end up crushing each other or having some conflict. If you want to use forms, find one plugin for forms. Do not install 6 plugins to use forms. Figure out what you want to do. If you want to sell stuff, you get WooCommerce. You don't get WooCommerce and 5 other selling stuff plugins. So some plugins that are really important are security ones. My Philadelphia chapter website was hacked, and when I was the president, and I spent way too many evenings going through and trying to figure out what was going on. And it was apparently being used to host an illegal music feed somewhere in the Middle East. So, and that came into play because the site was giving me weird errors, and I found a free plugin called WordFence Security. And when I installed that and ran the scan on it, it pointed out there were all these illegal subfolders that had been added into the website, and I was able to delete those and save the website. So plugins can be handy for security. Uh, Here we've got one for image optimization. You want to copy a post by duplicating it. If you think, if you want the software to do something and it's not, there's probably a plugin to do that. One of the cool ones is Jetpack. Jetpack will help you archive your software. It'll push your posts out to Twitter and to Facebook and to LinkedIn and Tumblr too, I think. I get more into that in details in the 201 presentation that I do. I go through a whole host of those, but this is just so you know that you can customize things by installing things. There is a risk to this because if it's a bad plugin or it's no longer maintained, it can be a threat point for people to hack in and access your site. So you only want to have plugins that are actively maintained and up to date. And it will say, oh, 3 of your plugins are out of date. Do you want to update them? Probably yes. Yes, you do. So that's why you also don't want to have 200 of these in there, because then you have to worry about 200 of them being updated and working well together. Just have the ones in there that you're using, deactivate and remove the ones you're not.
So are plugins something you have to buy, or are they just out there?
Sometimes. Some of them are free. Some of them are money only, and some of them are free with an option to make it money.
I see. Okay.
So for instance, in here, I think this duplicate post, that's a free one. I don't see a way that they could charge you money to make that functionality better, because it's just copying a post to make, as a template for a new post. The security one, that one is free, and it gives you, it's like, oh, do you pay for your antivirus or do you get the free one? Well, the free one's there, but they want you to upgrade to the full version. That's what this is. It gives you some level of security, but it's not as strong as if you'd given them more money.
So an interesting thing about your Middle Eastern hackers, STC is an acronym for Saudi Telecom Company, and it just could be that they had you confused.
It's possible, but they probably shouldn't have been hosting an illegal music share on my website under Saudi Telecom either. So we're getting close to the end here, I promise. I'm going to talk about users. So when you have someone sign into the site, there are 5 different default levels of access they can have to the site. And as the creator of the site, you will be given administrator access, which is the highest level power, of course, because you're the administrator. You can do everything. There's 2 sub-level ones, editor and author. Editor can publish and manage other people's stuff, but they don't have the full access of the administrator to install plugins and that kind of thing. An author is someone that can write their own stuff and publish it, but only their stuff. So the editor can do their stuff and other people's posts be published. The author can only publish their own things. The contributor can write things, but they can't publish them. So they just go in as a draft. Then it would go to the editor or the admin to review that content and publish it. So that way you could have a junior writer creating content for your site and then have an editor review that content before it goes live and is published. The last level is subscriber. This is if you want people to be able to sign into your site for some reason, like if, I don't know, I have no use for subscriber, but from the STC community model website. But if you want people to, I have a sign in on your website for some reason, you can set them up as a subscriber. They won't be able to create any content, but they can get a sign in bonus of some sort. When you create a user, you have to use a username. You can't change that username once it's created. First name and last name. You need to have a nickname. The nickname is only used when you have to display something. So there's a display name publicly as, which is the bottom item here. You can have it display as the username. You can have it display as the first name. You can have it display as the last name, comma, first name, or you can have it displayed as the nickname. So in this scenario, according to how it is set up here, if I were to post something on this site, it would just appear as STC-PMC. It would not be attributed to me. If you look in the back end, it'll say I'm the person that posted it, but anyone on the front end will just see that the chapter has posted it. This is handy if you're the admin and you're constantly going in and updating and publishing stuff and you don't need your name dropped all over the site because it's your site. But likewise, if you have someone, if you're having more of a journalistic site and you're having a number of contributors who want their content to be recognized as their contribution, you would want to have their name in there as well. What you should never do is make it be your username, because then the hacker already has half of what they need to jump into your site illegally. They have the username. So do not use a username, and do not make your username admin, because that's the first thing any hacker is going to try and do to hack in with admin rights, is to try and sign in as admin. So never use a username named admin. You can name it anything you want, but don't pick admin. Last up are the settings. Settings has many options, and I am not going to go into all of them. But basically, this is the low-level configuration. What's the URL? Who can register for their site? What level do they automatically get assigned in as? There's like 100 different options underneath of reading and writing. And when you're writing, what's the date format and what's the structure for this? I'm not going to go into all of that. If you create a WordPress site, you can go in there and mess with this stuff, but the odds are you won't really need to change the defaults that much. It's worth looking at when you set up your site, but it's mostly things that you will set and forget and not have to come back to. But just so you know that it exists and it is there. That's why it is in this part of the presentation. Are there any questions about this dashboard column here? Posts down to settings. Everything in basic WordPress. Okay.
We're none
Well,
into that.
okay. Well, I'll move out of WordPress, and the next section is something called cPanel, which I mentioned at the very start. Not all hosting companies use cPanel. Most of the ones I've worked with do. cPanel is a website management tool that works at a level below WordPress. This was at the very beginning where I said, oh, you'll have an option to install WordPress from this software in here underneath this Softaculous apps installer. If you were to expand that, each of these is a menu that pops up when you click the plus. It'll say install WordPress. That's where that was. Only my screenshot, cropped it to just be that little Softaculous thing. So in here, there are many options, and I am not going to go into all of them here, but just so you know that this is a tool that exists, and I will go into some of the more popular ones that you might use out of the box. First up, there's a login. It's a different URL that's controlled by your domain host, not the registration place, but the place where the files live. They will give you a separate username and password to access this program or an equivalent program when you create your account. This should be a different username and different password than it is for actually accessing WordPress, because this is like the structure around WordPress. Something that a lot of communities use, and other people do too, is something called email forwarding. And this is cool because you might have an email address. Let's say it's like me, and you have a Gmail account. Well, that's great, but you just paid for a URL to a website, and it's, myurl.com, and you want your email address to look like it's coming from and to my email or mywebsite.com. Well, you can create a forwarder, and what that does is anything sent to an email address with your website's domain gets forwarded to your Gmail account that you actually are using. So in this example here, we're creating example@cac-stc.org. And whenever someone sends an email to that, it will go to example@gmail.com. So, lasers. Example@domains will forward to this one. Or you can say, no, it doesn't go anywhere. So this is really cool for branding the email addresses that appear on your website. You can create multiple forwarders to different accounts. So here we have example at going at CAC. all that.org, going to this Gmail account, but maybe you have one and it's webmaster@youraccount.org. And maybe you don't trust your webmaster, so you also send it to you. So that way, whenever someone sends something to the webmaster, it goes to the webmaster and it also goes to you. So you can see whether the webmaster is keeping up with their job. The STC chapters that I've worked with, they often use this. So that way they can say, oh, president at our, STC PMC or Chicago or New York or whatever. And when there's a new president, they don't have to change the address all over the website. They just change the forwarder to point to the new president's email address behind the scenes. Does that make sense?
So where do you set it up to go to more than one person?
You just add the same thing twice, only you change the forward. You put the top part in the same and put a different email address in there. And then it'll have two records. It'll say this top email address goes to this one and it goes to another one and any other number of them.
Who designed that?
It's not super great UI, but that's how it works. And I don't have a screenshot of it here, but there is a list and it'll show you in that list all of the email forwarders that you have and where they're going to. So all of the ones that example at goes to this address, goes to this address, goes to that address. It'll show them all there. And then you can delete any of the ones you don't want, and then you add new ones. It is not the best UI, but it's probably also not something you're changing on a daily basis. Backing up your website is important because if something happens that's bad, you don't want to create it from scratch. There is an option in cPanel to back up your website. You can download a full backup. You can download your home directory, your database, which is where your actual website is stored, and all those email forwarders you just spent 2 hours setting up. You can download all of those in here, and then if something is bad, you can re-upload them pretty easily. There are plugins that will automatically generate backups for you, and I go into that in the 201. I know Jetpack will do that for if you pay money, but I believe one of the security plugins that I recommend in the second session does that for free. And you can say, oh, send me a backup of the website once a week, twice a month, whatever you want. And that's a very handy thing to have. So here's a quick list when you're getting started. Pick a theme that works for your site. As I discussed, free is good. You might get more with a paid one, but shop for what you want. If the free one's doing the job, then don't spend the money. If you want something really fancy, you're probably gonna have to put out some money. Make sure it's updated regularly by the owner and by you. You'll get a notification saying this theme is out of date. Do you want to update it? Yes, you do. Make sure WordPress is updated regularly. You can even set your host to automatically move to the latest version of WordPress, which is good because that includes a lot of security fixes. Having a backdated version of WordPress can be troublesome because then some of the plugins might not work. And likewise, if your plugins aren't updated and WordPress isn't updated, then you'll run into other conflicts on the site. So make sure WordPress is updated, your themes are updated, your plugins are updated. Make sure you're actually using them. If you're not, get rid of them. Back up your site at least monthly. Manage your user access with the admins and the editors and things like that. If you're using email forwarders, you do that in cPanel. Pet peeve of mine, update the copyright date on your page so it doesn't say copyright 2014. It makes it look like you haven't touched the site in 7 years. Do not forget to maintain your domain registration so your URL is not given out to someone else and then you've got to come up with a new URL. Groom your media library so you don't send pictures of Ben and 6 of Sarah. And ensure your post categories are clearly used so feeds work. So if you're not using a category for a feed, you probably don't need the category. Don't overcomplicate your site with your posts. As I've alluded to, there's a second session where I go into some of these items in more detail. I've got more information on customizing your site, how to connect it with social media. So when you create a post, it goes out to Facebook and Twitter and whatever else you want. More information on plugin management, especially security plugins. Using HTTPS. That's pretty much a de facto standard at this point, but you might have to jump through some hoops to get your provider to set you up with HTTPS. I go into a few more options that are in cPanel, including file management and the easy antivirus program they have in there. How to use FTP to move files to and from your server. How to set up search engine optimization. This is how Google can find the content on your site. You might have the best content on your site, but if you don't have it categorized right and set up right, Google's never going to find it and people aren't going to come to your site. How to set that up and integrate it better with your site. Similarly, I have Google Analytics in there. I know that's not the next bullet, but I'm going to travel through time here. Google Analytics is seeing who came to your site from where. How many people from Yugoslavia really like your content? How many hits you got after you put that last big announcement up? You're having a special event. How many people came to look at that? Google Analytics is free to set up, and there's paid versions of things, but for your site, the free version is probably fine. I will discuss how to configure that and set that up. There's also event calendar integration. I alluded to this earlier. This is where you can create a free Google Calendar and embed that on your site. So whenever you post something on that calendar, it automatically appears on your website. And I even include a section on how to set up, using widgets, a way for them to subscribe to your mailing list. In my example, I use MailChimp because that is a relatively free and easy to use newsletter software that different groups use. And it's pretty easy to say, oh, sign up for my mailing list, and make that be a button or a field in a widget on the side of your website. If you're looking for some reference materials, I highly recommend WordPress for Dummies. Do not be intimidated and insulted that you're a dummy. This book is for more than just dummies. It is a wealth of information and is really good at explaining everything I did, but taking up way more time. WordPress, the missing manual, is almost as good, and I like that one as well. The Dummies, I think, is a little bit more complete, but that's a good resource as well. And here's some links to the CAC on how to customize your chapter email addresses. I have a number of how-to articles out on the CAC website specific for communities and how to set up their website. There is, I didn't double check to see if this link still works. Okay, well, if you want to join the STC Webmasters Slack channel, send me a note because this URL probably expired yesterday. And there is an STC Communities website, which I forgot that these slides were in here. And if you're an STC, you can join the Communities website for free. And there's any number of channels there that you can discuss things in. And last up, if you want to contact me with my old glasses, there's my email address. If you want to see the stupid things I put on Twitter, which is a lot of STC stuff, there's my cheesy free website, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you want, I can switch over to this, and this is what free WordPress looks like. You can see I'm signed in up here in the upper right with a little profile. This is the main page, which is set up to show blog posts, which I don't post on here very often because I don't think there's a lot of traffic to this site. But what is in here is all of the presentation and publications that I've done. Here's Websites 101. If you want to get the handouts, you can click on there. This is the one that I did for the Michigan Great Lakes last fall, but it's pretty much the same presentation as I gave now. And it has all the slides and all the text and all of my notes that explain what the slides are about as well. There's even a recording of this from 2 years ago now when I did this for the IDL SIG. So if you really want to hear me talk some more, but younger, that's there too. And there's secret bonus materials if you come there as well. Any questions, comments, spitballs?
That was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. I know it's a lot, but to fit it all in an hour, it's a little challenging.
Yeah, and that's giving me some ideas for the chapter website. I'll probably either email you or talk to you tomorrow at the website meeting if you're available.
I'm hoping to be there. The trick is I have another meeting at 7:30 my time, and your meeting's at 6 o'clock my time. So I would like to be able to eat dinner and things. So it's a little tricky.
We
No
won't be
problem.
offended if you eat while you're in the meeting.
But my family may be offended if I'm not eating with them.
That's perfectly fair.
I actually have a question.
Go,
I
Tony.
was just slow. Okay, so I set up my little website several years ago. I went through a bunch of YouTube videos to figure out a lot of what you've told us today. And I have the page where people can get updates to your website. I can't remember what it's called. Maybe I can go there and figure it out. But anyway, I have thousands and thousands and thousands of people signing up for my website, and I haven't done anything to it in several years. What is happening? Who has hacked it, and what are they using it for? How can I figure that all out?
Is it a WordPress site, or did you set it up under another service?
Under GoDaddy, but it is a WordPress site.
Okay, GoDaddy's just where it's hosted. You can go into the site, and I can recommend a few security plugins that you can install for free to see if people are taking over the site, or is it that just people are adding many, many comments to the site? Because that's
They're
another
adding
thing that can happen.
absolutely nothing. They're just signing up to get my updates or something, which I've done none of.
Well, I don't think that's going to hurt anything because you're not sending them anything, but I would have to see how your site is configured. I don't know what is, if you created the ability for people to sign up, the odds are it's giving them that subscriber status on the site. And then it's up to you as to what people with that status get to do. And if you haven't done anything, they're probably not doing anything.
Okay.
If you're concerned that the site has been taken over and done, and people are using it for nefarious deeds, that's another scenario. Then I recommend you install the WordFence plugin and run the scan on that to see if there's any malware buried in your site. And that's a free plugin.
A WordFence. Thank you.
Yes.
Tony, what have you done something that would cause people to want to sign up? Like, I mean,
Write a book.
is there a link in your book saying sign up here or something like that?
Well, I posted links to some sites that I found interesting. It was cultural stuff, so something about Black Latinas or something, and a couple of other sites that I linked to from my site. That's the only thing that I can figure that's taking people to my site, because I've literally done nothing for at least 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sounds strange.
Yep. Okay, so nothing nefarious probably, but I forgot the name of it. Patrick made me forget.
Oh,
Tell me again.
WordFence. I think Tim put it in the chat as well if you want to take a look at it.
Okay, thanks a bunch. WordFence. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I really enjoyed the presentation.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a bunch.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much too. I didn't have much to say, but I really enjoyed it. There's a lot there to, I think you did a real good job of covering it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Me too.
this is
Are the slides going to be available on the website along with the recording?
I'll try to make them available if Tim has them on SlideShare.
Okay.
Don't have them on SlideShare, but I can send the handout to you
No
to
worries.
share.
Whatever works best for you, Tim. I'll get it up there one way or another.
Yeah.
And as I said, you can go to my website, and the slides from the last time we gave the presentation are there, and they are nearly identical.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
At one point, I was putting up every single time that I did that, but then SlideShare got bought up by someone else, and I didn't trust the new people that bought it, so I took all my stuff off of SlideShare, and I rearranged my personal site just to say, here's the latest slides that I presented.
Mm.
So this is Piyush. Thank you for this presentation. I actually have dabbled in WordPress now for almost 4 years, and I have to say you did cover a lot of ground here in a very succinct presentation. But it is, I don't know, it is maybe an easy product if you just want to do the default things, but I found it very challenging to keep up to date and to stay on top of things and add features and so on and so forth. It's free. It's extremely well done. I think the majority of websites are hosted on WordPress technology. So, to that extent, I think if someone were to spend the time, they probably can get a quality website out of it.
Yeah,
Just my
you
comment.
get out of it what you put into it. It can be a very simple and easy website, or you can go all out and spend months working on it. Although, as I say, I caution against making your site too complicated, because then if you're not there, then no one else is going to figure out how you have it set up. And that's what I'm running into with stc.org, that people that set these things up a decade ago are not there anymore, and no one knows what all of the plugins are for, and half of them aren't working right, and some of them aren't updated, and what are they being used for. So it's a lot to unearth and uncover and decipher. So there's one thing about making your site really cool, and there's another thing about making it really complicated. So in general, I recommend simplicity and build up from there as needed. Don't over-engineer the site, because it'll be a nightmare for whoever's downstream after you're not there. Unless it's your personal site, but if you're working with an organization, I mean.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions at the moment? I'll take that as no. But we give one big round of applause for our amazing speaker, Tim Esposito.